The great forgotten issue of our day is influence. People, this just seems to go right over their heads. In all of the arguments over beliefs, over free speech, over politics, over religion, over lifestyle choices, over everything, constant arguing over everything that's going on in our country today and in the world today, people are missing this one key point, which is very important to Jesus himself, as we're going to see very soon. They're missing the point of how you're influencing kids with whatever you do and however much influence you have. Now, the principle extends to influencing adults, of course, right? Because it's important how we influence adults. But it's much more important how we influence kids. Why? Because kids are much more influenceable. And they're being formed and they're growing. And all of their identities are forming. And their spirits and their souls and their hearts are forming. They're not just born, they're born with some things, right? But then other things, many things are developed in them as they grow. That's why they grow. Just as their bodies grow, so their spirits and their hearts and their minds grow, right? That's just the way it is. So how people choose to use whatever amount of influence they have to influence children tells you like everything you need to know about that person. Okay? So let's talk about free speech. Free speech is a huge issue in our country, right? And so many people camp there. They're like, you can't take away my right of free speech, right? It goes on both sides of the political spectrum. Left, right, political, not political, I mean, left, right, liberal, conservative. Musicians go off on it. Movie celebrities go off on it. Everybody goes off on it, right? The whole LGBTQ community goes off on it. Everybody's just camping out on free speech. This is America, right? Which, yeah, freedom is, yeah, you have freedom, but freedom that is ungoverned by love and untempered by love will always hurt somebody. This principle is talked about extensively by the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians, I believe it's 8, 9, and 10. And he explains how he subverts his own freedom for the sake of others extensively. He also talks about it again in Romans 12. He goes over the same principle again, saying that, hey, if my freedom hurts somebody else, I'm going to rein it in and not do it. But hardly anybody lives by that principle these days because they've just run with the belief that freedom is the ultimate thing. Well, freedom's not the ultimate thing. Love is the ultimate thing. In God's kingdom, love rules the day, not freedom. Freedom is a principle of God's kingdom, but it's below love, not above it. As evidenced by these verses where Paul himself teaches us that when your freedom is hurting somebody, you don't do it. Okay? So, and why? Because of how it influences them. If your freedom is influencing somebody in a way that hurts them, you don't do it. Or else you do it somewhere where they don't see it. Okay? And this is the point that so many people in our country are missing. And especially they're missing it as it pertains to children. With social media being so prevalent and kids having access to it, it's like kids see so much of what's going on. And it is my honest belief that those who are trying to depopulate the planet and destroy the human race for whatever reasons, their own reasons, they know this, and so they fan the flames of these controversial things, right? So that the destructive influence will reach children. Because they're smart, right? They realize this stuff I'm talking about, when most of the common people don't. But if the common people did, they'd wisen up and they wouldn't buy into their stupid traps. So, let's talk about the main Bible verse that supports all this. So Jesus said, "It is inevitable the stumbling blocks must come, but woe to them through who they come." And then he makes it even more pointed, and he talks about kids. He says, "Whoever then causes one of these little ones to stumble, one of these little ones who believes in me," talking about himself, Jesus, "whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in Jesus to stumble, it would be better for that." How do they do that? By influencing them in their hearts and their minds. If I could paraphrase it, all right? Well, I'm not going to. You get the point. He says it would be better for that person to have a heavy rock tied around their neck and they're thrown into the ocean. That's Jesus, the most loving guy that ever existed, the Son of God. You know, if anybody said that today, they'd be like, "Oh, you're a hater." Well, he's just saying a very loving thing. He's saying how you influence kids is pretty dang important. So you better think about it. But yet, 98.6% of people in our country aren't even aware that they're doing it. And when they are aware that they're doing it, they don't care. Why? Because they themselves are more important. Their free speech, their rights are more important than how they're influencing kids. I really like to pick on musical artists because they're the masters at this. They influence millions of kids worldwide, right? And they do it all in the name of free speech. "Oh, I can't free speech. You can't censor me," right? And yet, they're influencing the hearts and the minds and the souls and the spirits of millions of children with whatever they portray in their music, with the spirit behind their music. Not to mention what they sing about in their lifestyles, right? So you have all these artists portraying all this complete garbage and influencing millions of children with it. And when anybody calls them out, they cry, "Oh, free speech, you can't censor me." Cowards. That is the most cowardly thing there is, because they're just like, I don't care. I don't care that I'm horribly influencing millions of kids' lives. It's my right as an American. Or whatever. It's my right it's free speech. Or it's my right as a human being. Right? It's not a strictly American thing. It's just the way people think. But it's not just musical artists. It's tons of people. It's the LGBT community. Now, not all of them. There are some people in the LGBT community who they just have that lifestyle and they just live it, and they're not trying to influence anybody. I know some. I have friends who are in that category, and they're cool people because they're not out there trying to proselytize kids to become like them. I have no problem with those people, but the people in the LGBT community, LGBTQIA, S2 or something like that these days, if they're out there intentionally trying to get kids, then I have a problem with you people, those people, if any of you watch this. Why? Because it's your thing. Go do it yourself. It's not up to me to judge you, but if you're trying to influence children to do it, that's a problem. Okay? So then I get upset with preachers because preachers who influence millions of children don't actually teach them the love of Christ, the love of God. They tell them they're going to go to hell. They just fill their mind. They teach them all the most horrible stories from the Bible at like age 4 and age 5 and age 6 and when all the kids are just like traumatized by these stories. And I believe most of the Bible. I believe the truth of the Bible. I believe in Christ, right? Obviously, that's what I do on this channel. But it's like the Bible is like complex math. You give it to people in stages. You start with the basics. Hey, you believe in Jesus. He loves you. Develop a relationship with him. Boom. Just like Jesus said, let the children come unto me. And people who tried to keep the kids from coming to him, he was like, excuse me? He let those kids come to me right now. And you get out of their way, right? You start with the basics. And then when they get a little older, you can start with some of the more complex things. Then when they reach their teens, you get to the more complex. Then when they get to be adults, you can do those more mature themes, right? But so many popular Christian leaders, with their humongous influence over children, give them all this horrible, terrible, scary stuff, and not just from the Bible, but from Christian culture, right? It's just popular in Christian culture, without thinking how it's influencing the hearts and minds of those children. And this is one major reason, if not the major reason, why when kids grow up, often when kids who are raised in Christianity grow up, they abandon it. Why? Because they were traumatized as kids. I know these people personally. In fact, I will tell you one example of my own life, although I don't like to talk about it. I'm going to make the point. When I was a kid, we were raised in Christian culture, and somewhere, it wasn't my parents, but somebody had these comic books. They were written by some Christian person, and the comic books portrayed Christians being tortured, right? Like martyrdom. And it was very graphic. And like we were reading this at age 10. And it so traumatized me that I ended up having this phobia of being tortured for like my whole life. Okay? Now, I hate talking about that, and I hardly ever do, but I said it to make a point. Christian leaders, how you influence children is extremely important, and you shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. You should be starting when kids are 4 with, hey, Jesus loves you more than you can ever know. And leave it at that. You look in the Bible, Jesus didn't have any of those complex conversations with kids. He had them with adults and Pharisees. And the Pharisees were probably the ones that would have told the kids they were going to go to hell. So, I pick on everybody when I say this. I pick on myself. I watch myself. How am I influencing children? When I make videos, I realize there could be children watching these videos. So I have to think. And sometimes I even go back and delete videos because I'm like, some kid might see that. That's bad. Right? I'm not exempt. None of us are exempt from influence. Now, you might not influence millions of people. You might influence a few people. Okay, but how you influence them is important. You just have to be aware. We have to be aware. All of us, we're all under this mandate. Don't want to make it sound legalistic, but we all live with this dynamic. It's an inescapable fact of human life, right? We are going to influence people, period. And it's extremely important how we do so, right? Yes, that's right. So I say that to the few people who might watch this. Maybe it'll get popular someday. You have to think of how you're going to influence people, and think, more importantly, how you're influencing kids, right? And if perhaps any of those popular people ever watch these videos, just remember, those who influence a lot of people are held much more accountable than those who only influence a few people. Thank you, and have a nice day.